Welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue our conversation with Joe Kolb. Again, if you're listening to us for the first time, this is actually our first guest that we have on the podcast. Actually, this is the first English language episode that we do. The episode prior to this one and this one, we're going to continue our conversation with Joe Kolb. We're going to get into a little bit. More specific into some of the stuff that he's doing right now. Let me just give you the quick bio, and then I just want to say something real quick. Joe was a veteran journalist who reported on cartel and transnational criminal organizations and border security in the area of Ciudad Juarez. His career changed course when he became a corrections officer in New Mexico, where he became a gang expert. He traveled to El Salvador to research MS-13 and conducted gang identification and mitigation strategies to law enforcement around the country, or training for law enforcement. Joe made one more career detour, which is what we want to get into in this episode, and he became a medical legal death investigator for the state of New Mexico. Now in semi-retirement, Joe is the director of the Southwest Forensic Investigators Association, where one of the projects they're developing is the recovery of migrant remains along the border. And like I said during the first episode, he failed to put in his bio that he's actually written 3 books that have been authored or that have been published, and we'll get a little bit into that. Before we start talking, this is where I really want to get into the whole recovery and identifying migrant remains. At this point, it might get a little graphic. That's usually something that we put out before every episode, but just because of the nature of what we're going to be talking about, which is the recovery of migrant remains, it could get a little bit more graphic than the previous episode. So, Joe, welcome again.
Thank
and
you.
again, thank you for accepting our invitation to be with us during this 2 episodes. So we started in Queens. We ended up in New Mexico working at the jail. Now, you said you spent 4 years at the jail, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And at what point, how did you end up working for the medical examiner's office? How did you make that transition? What made you make a decision to walk away from corrections and into this?
I definitely want to preface this by saying I absolutely loved corrections. Like I tell my wife, I said, one of the biggest mistakes I made was not doing corrections 20 years ago, where I would be retired now, like fully retired. It's a really interesting dynamic. I've discussed this with police officers, and they would tell me I could never be in corrections, and I would tell them, you know what, I don't think I'd really want to be a street cop.
I'm one of those, and I don't. My hats off to corrections officers, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah, well, my wife learned not to ask me what I saw that day at work, especially in booking. Booking, there are things that you can't unsee. So I absolutely loved it. When I was telling with some of the cops I'm friends with, I said, listen, if somebody runs away from me, they only got about 20 yards to go, and that's it. Then it's either they stop or it's on. I don't have to go running through backyards or over fences. And most importantly, I don't have to stand at a traffic accident at 2:00 in the morning when it's 20 degrees out. So that's why I like corrections. But just getting into, from an academic standpoint, because again, I taught, I write, it's just talking with these guys. The women, that's a whole different dynamic. I try to stay away from that unit as much as I can. The corrections dynamic is actually interesting, and I really didn't want to leave. In fact, it's like once it's in your blood, you really don't lose it. So actually now, like I'm not busy enough, I'm on the advisory board for the Metropolitan Detention Center here in Albuquerque. So I help to evaluate and affect policy, which is kind of fun. But the reason why I left was nothing other than just physical wear and tear. You know, we were working 12-hour shifts, and you were virtually guaranteed at least one mandatory shift a week. So you're working 4 12-hour shifts. And with that, you are also virtually guaranteed to work another 4 hours after one of those shifts. So that's a 16-hour shift. And I live an hour away from the jail. So working 16 hours, driving an hour home, sleeping for 4 hours, and turning around and doing it again got to be too grueling for me. So, you know, again, looking for an avenue to use my skill set of observation, speaking with people, you know, interviewing techniques, and also my gang background, which I'll discuss how that really paid off too. I had an interest in the working for the Office of the Medical Investigator for a while, and just happenstance, I checked it out, applied, and got the job the next day. So it worked out well. It's here in Albuquerque, and 15 minutes away from the house. So it worked out beautifully. So I also tell people tongue in cheek, in this job, people don't complain my whole shift either. So, you know, I got to deal with virtually every form of death imaginable. I don't know if you remember, there used to be that TV show, I forgot what channel it was, 1001 Ways to Die or something like that. Well, I saw most of it, and it was fascinating. You know, it's what, you know, can happen to the human body in the most tragic of circumstances. What I would actually called good deaths. You know, you get, and this is what I loved about the South Valley of Albuquerque, which is definitely predominantly Hispanic, where, you know, you get an old 80-year-old grandma. She died peacefully in her bed. You know, one of the questions we would ask the sheriff deputies is how many people are there, because in the culture out here, when somebody passes away, the hotline is ringing all over the family. So I mean, I've been in houses where there were 50 people by the time I got there. So, and you know, a lot of my colleagues didn't like this, but I thought it was, you know, if it wasn't a tragic death, like I said, a good death, grandma passed away peacefully. I thought it was beautiful, you know, because again, you look at the culture, you look at the beauty of it, and you embrace it. You know, so I would tell the family, you know, we had great chaplains with the Albuquerque Police Department and with the Bernalillo County Sheriffs. And if there wasn't anything suspicious, like I would tell the family, just wait outside, give me a couple minutes with grandma. And I would check her out. Nothing was wrong. I let them all come in and say goodbye to her, you know, and it was beautiful. But then you have the tragedies. You know, I had multiple homicides that I had to deal with. I had an Albuquerque female police cadet who was murdered by her boyfriend in a murder-suicide. And the son was in the other room when this happened. So, you know, I mean, you guys are cops, you know the bad things that we see, you know, but it's fascinating when you look at the purpose of a death investigator is to give a voice to the deceased. Try to find the answers why and how this person died. I mean, I had some weird cases that, you know, would I have suggested, or actually I did suggest, or would I have preferred either the police or even one of our pathologists taking a different direction? Yeah. I mean, I had one case that comes to mind where it was a woman, lived by herself in a pretty big house. Her daughter calls up, said, Mom shot herself in the head. Now, Mom has had a .38 caliber Daughter didn't notice she had this weapon. Mom is laying in her bed, single gunshot wound to the head. She used a face cloth as a suppressor, which she lives by herself in a big house. Why does she need a suppressor? And then the gun, if you've ever fired a 38, and I'm sure you guys all have, it's got a bit of a kick to it, and if she used the right hand where it appeared that's where the entrance wound was, you would think that the gun would kick out to the right. Well, I found the gun wedged between her left arm and trunk with the grip facing upwards to her underarm. And I'm going, how did this wind up here? It just didn't make sense. So me and the CSI supervisor, we're hypothesizing, and the pathologist said, no, this is a suicide. So, you'd walk away and you go, all right, well, we thought this one through. Still didn't leave a good taste in my mouth, but you get the big.
Joe, educate us a little bit, because pretty much everybody knows what a homicide detective does. What is the main function? Then what are the main duties of a medical examiner investigating?
So we're the guys that determine the fundamental definition is we help determine cause and manner of death by accumulating evidence. We're the guys at the scenes with the CSIs taking pictures. We start from far away, do a full diameter layout, gradually move closer into the body, take photos, look at wounds, speak with bystanders, speak with family members, and try to put together the circumstances which put this person in that position of death.
Okay. So what's the working relationship like then with the homicide detectives when you get to a scene?
I had a great relationship with them. So we go to a scene here in Albuquerque, and you guys could check the stats. Even though our stats are down, we had over almost 150 homicides in Albuquerque last year. So that's pretty steep. I would show up at a scene. Well, actually, let me backstep. So to get dispatched to a scene, we would get called up by the either the homicide detective or the CSI supervisor. Get the basics, what happened, where it is, blah, blah, blah. Show up at the scene and then work closely. I mean, we worked hand in glove. I'm not, again, me, but, for your listeners, I'll listen to people. I'm not going to go in there and say, I'm the death investigator. This is how the person died. I would say, so Rob, what do you think? What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? So we would work really well together. We would go, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? One of the things that would always drive me crazy is that the homicide detectives always wanted to know what the entrance and exit wound is. And we can't tell them because it's almost impossible out in the field, especially in some of the conditions that we worked in. It could be the top of a staircase. I had somebody, well, guns were being fired a block over. So, you're not going to be able to tell what the entrance and exit wound is. We just say there's a defect in the chest and there's a defect in the back, and then we let the pathologist determine. But, I learned some of the tips that, I wound up teaching courses of gunshot wounds to the head where you can tell based on powder burns, stippling, which, you guys know is that pocking from the firing of the projectile. And then the other thing too is, talk about, a surreal experience. I was in the autopsy suite and the doctor goes, so you want to feel what an entrance wound actually feels like? I go, yeah. He goes, stick your finger in this. I literally stuck my finger inside this guy's skull and you can feel beveling on an entrance wound. So it's almost like punching. If I was to take a pen, you take a pen, I don't know if you can see that, and you punch it through, you could actually feel beveling on the inside. So yeah, that was one of those moments where it's like, okay, I just stuck my finger in somebody's skull now. But we would work together and then we would say, okay, this is where we're at. we would put paper bags on the hand to preserve any evidence that may be on there, gunshot wound, DNA, gunshot powder, DNA or anything like that, bag the hands, and then bring them to the office of the medical investigator where the pathologist would do the autopsy. And if you haven't seen an autopsy, it's always a fun time when you have a rookie cop who's never seen an autopsy.
What's the worst level of decomposition that you've seen?
I've seen all levels of decomposition. Probably the worst scene, and it's kind of morbid and grotesque, but it became known as the jacuzzi guy. We got a call that neighbors smelt something malodorous coming from a guy's backyard. I can smell this from the street. Went into the backyard, and the cop said, he's in the jacuzzi. I go, okay. When was the last time anybody saw him? About a month ago. Mm. Yeah. I pop, and you know how jacuzzis, they'll have the flaps covers. Mm-hmm. So I undid the one flap, and I got a face full of this guy who's been simmering in a jacuzzi with the jacuzzi on, mind you, for almost a month.
And let's start with the fact that bodies, when they've been in water and you try to remove them, the skin just comes right off. And this guy's been sitting for how long?
I don't know if you viewers want to hear the rest of this story about what happened, but you're right.
They've already been warned.
Yeah.
They've been warned, yeah.
Yeah, they've been warned. I mean, I think one of you guys said soup. It was, you know, what it was like is, you know, when you boil a chicken and you get that layer of fat on the surface, that's what it looked like. Wow. I said, there's no way I'm taking this guy out. And he was a pretty big guy. And our transporter had come over. And he, you know, I said, listen, I'm just going to call the fire department up and see if they can have a lift and pull him up. And literally while I'm on the phone with this guy, now he put his white bunny suit on that you see on the TV shows a lot. And I put mine on too, because I knew this wasn't going to be good. Literally, as I hung up with the fire department, this guy, the transport guy, has the decedent halfway out of the jacuzzi. And I go, we're committed now. And you're right. The skin is coming off. It was a horrific experience. The poor gentleman, because we couldn't get a good grip, fell to the deck, and the transporter got a face of this gentleman. I just got the splatter on the legs, but that was definitely my worst. But, you know, you'll have cases where the person is sitting in, and we're approaching that time of season, where it's like, hey, you know, we haven't heard from Herb in the past 6 weeks. Where is he? And Albuquerque just started this organization called Albuquerque Community Safety, which is really good for law enforcement because they don't have to do a lot, or I don't want to say they don't have to do as many welfare checks as they used to, because this organization will go out and do welfare checks. So, you know, they may go out, look in the window, or the family will be there and say, you go in. And, you know, there's Cousin Harry sitting in the chair who's been sitting there for 6 weeks in an unair conditioned apartment in Albuquerque in August. And that gets very bad too. You know, the individual gets blisters. It's called bulle, and these blisters pop. And I've been lucky, but some of my colleagues have had horrific experiences with these blisters moving decedents.
And going back to the gentleman in the jacuzzi, were you able to determine the cause of death?
Yeah, he had a heart attack. So what had happened? He was in the jacuzzi, probably only flipped the one flap over, likely had a heart attack, died, slipped under the water. And I mean, we get winds here in the springtime, 60, 70 miles an hour. So that would have been easy enough to flip the cover back over until somebody smelt.
It is like a movie. It's like stuff you see on TV.
Rob, I've seen stuff that I have never seen on TV before. You see a lot of crazy stuff. And again, more than 1,000 ways of how individuals can die. We've actually had cases that, you go, this is like something out of the movie Final Destination. I had a poor DEA agent, after serving a warrant down in the southern part of the state, driving back to his office, and was behind, I don't know if it was a plumbing truck or a maintenance truck or something. Pipe came loose, went right through his windshield into his chest.
Mm.
Final Destination stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I never drive behind those kind of vehicles.
yeah, you definitely don't. If you see pipes on a vehicle, don't go behind it.
Pipes and lumber and stuff like that. No,
Yep.
never drive behind them.
No, it's crazy. We had a case of a doctor who was a body donation. He would harvest body parts that would, be transplanted into other individuals. This poor guy was going to do a harvest of, I forgot what a heart, I think it was. The poor doctor died of a heart attack in the operating room while he's harvesting a heart for somebody else.
Holy crap.
So yeah, this is like
Somebody else take over? Did somebody else take over the surgery, or?
I don't know. This is like true tales from the crypt, and you gotta have a morbid sense of humor, because the stuff that we see, it's kind of funny is that, and we tease the cops sometimes. It's like, yeah, you get to leave here. I'm stuck with this, especially if it was like a natural death, but like a decom.
Yeah.
One of my last scenes, it was actually pretty funny. The poor gentleman, he passed away, natural causes, but he was down for quite a while. And we had he was a rookie cop. He goes, yeah, I want to help you. I want to help you. I go, okay, come up with me upstairs. And it was bad. He goes, as he's gagging, he literally goes, wait a minute, I'll be right back. And he comes back up with his gas mask on. Not a COVID mask, literally his tear gas mask. So, but he pitched in and, but, getting back to your question about the relationship we had, the police out here, and I can't speak for cops all over the place. If we needed help, they were there to help us all the time. So the fire department also. Never had a situation where they would say, not my job description, can't help you. So we had a great relationship with the cops. And that's one of the things I truly miss.
That's good. And going back to the more morbid sense of humor, people don't understand. It does sound very morbid, but it's kind of a release, I guess, for us in law enforcement, where we always make a joke at the most inappropriate moments, and we'll laugh at something in the middle of a death investigation or a homicide investigation, and the public perception is that we're heartless and we don't care, we don't care about the victim, and it's not that. You have to release all that one way or another. You can't take that with you. You're taking it with you at the end of the day anyway, but you got to release some of that somehow. And I think that's more of a
I remember going to a death call at that one Melody Motel, OBT.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a hotel, Joe, that, obviously people take prostitutes too. It's got mirrors and all that. And we got a call of a guy that, had a heart attack or something, and they saw the prostitute run out. The guy's sitting there, or he's laying in bed. Obviously, he's gone. Go in there, check him, call paramedics. They check him. Yeah, he's dead. So I'm waiting for the medical examiner. He shows up, goes in there, checks his pulse, checks a couple of things. He goes, yep. Yeah, he's dead. And he goes, it'll be a little bit. You can help me take it out. I'm like, okay. So I go to my car, and I'm wondering what he's doing, and I can see the door open. He goes and grabs his lunchbox and sits in the room and eats his lunch. And I go, "Do you sure you want to not get his body out?" He goes, "He's not going anywhere."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's lunchtime.
See,
Yeah,
I would do that. I would do that in the autopsy observation room with the cops who were there, especially the rookies, because we would do our autopsies in the morning. So if I knew there was going to be a rookie cop there, I would make sure I would go in, have my breakfast bagel or whatever, and sit there eating, explaining as the doctors are pulling out the organs, hey, there's your liver, or in the really gross cases where somebody was covered in maggots, I would always say, hey, you guys going to go out and have some Chinese food after this? You have those things.
Alex, did you ever call on-call Mama Mia's on a death investigation?
Call who?
On-call Mama Mia's. Remember Mama Mia's, the
Oh
pizza
yeah,
shop
yeah,
over
yeah,
in
yeah.
Hansel? So
Yeah.
we had this pizza shop. I was at the time it was owned by a reserve deputy. And 2 o'clock in the morning, you'd be in the middle of a death investigation. All you had to do was call Mama Mia's, and they'll bring a pizza. And
Yeah.
all you had to do was tip the driver. That was it. That's all you had to do. And so
Yeah.
we call it on-call Mama Mia's.
That's freaking awesome,
Yeah.
man.
Oh,
It's
Kevin.
still there. The pizza shop is still there. I don't know if they still own it.
They're still
But I
there. I'm
mean,
not
that's
sure
the
if Kevin
interesting
still
thing
owns
is
it
that
though.
it's not only a release, but I mean, it's a reality. We're all going to wind up some form or another. Hopefully, God forbid, it's not a homicide, but we're all going to be dead. And like I was saying earlier, you're going to have good deaths, like the grandma in bed surrounded by her family, or you're going to have, the stupid 16-year-old kid who showed up to a party he was uninvited to and brandished a 9mm until all the other homies brandished their 9mm and lit this kid up with 23 bullets.
Or the Final Destination, where the pipe just comes off the truck and goes through your windshield.
Yeah, see that scene. I mean, that came through our office, but I didn't personally handle that scene. But I had the one where the kid showed up at the party, and I just couldn't count the holes anymore on this kid. So you
Yeah,
see a lot of weird, huh?
No, talk about a sense of humor. We had one pass away in Disney in one of the RV areas at Fort Wilderness.
Wait. Hold on. Let me stop you right there. Nobody dies on Disney property. They could
Huh?
be decapitated in one of the rides, but they
All right,
always die on their way to the hospital.
all right. So let me say this: I heard that someone died at Disney, right? And the guy died in the back of the RV, had a heart attack. Big, big, heavy set guy. And, the whole procedure, everybody checks him out, paramedics. Well, the medical examiner shows up, he goes, oof, he's a big one. And goes and checks him out. And FD's like, hey, how do you want to get him out of here? Jokingly, and not realizing that the wife was still in the RV. He goes, we'll just cut him up and take him out in pieces. And you see her start crying and going, are you serious? Are you? And he's like, looks back and he goes, I'm kidding, ma'am. I'm kidding. We'll just cut a hole in the RV and pull him out that way.
Oh
Which
my
Oh
goodness.
my God.
they did. They ended up having to take the window out because he was so large. There's no way to get him out.
I
So
had a guy similar to that. Guy weighed 600 pounds, had a hospital bed in his living room, died in the bed. There was no way we were getting this guy out. Okay, so we're all thinking, all right, do we have to cut a hole in the front of his house? And it wasn't in a great part of town. So all we could think is, this is going to be like flea market time in this poor guy's house, even though he's deceased. So again, we call the fire department for their thoughts. And again, it becomes what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And then the captain who was there came up with a brilliant idea. We just got a huge tarp, and with those ratchet straps, we could ratchet them closed. We dragged this poor guy out of bed. It took 6 of us to pull this guy from the bed onto the floor. But then we wrapped him up in the tarp, and he wouldn't even fit in my body bag, actually, the poor guy. But we had to use a trauma one eventually. Wrapped him up in the tarp, secured it with 4 or 5 are the ratchet straps. Now you have to vision this. We didn't carry him out because the guy was so heavy. We literally had to spread our legs and pretty much slide him in a daisy chain through our legs out the house onto the stretcher. So yeah, death could be very complicated also to get the person to the medical examiner's office. And again, you want to try to mitigate, especially if there's a suspicion of foul play, any further trauma to the body. But I mean, the reality is, it's like, 600 pounds is 600 pounds, and that's tough. So yeah, that's.
I would assume that you have, but what's it like having to work a child death?
Bad. It's the worst thing possible. I had two, and there's just no way around the heartbreaking fact. One, and of course, I have four kids, 7 grandkids, and one on the way. So these 2 kids fell within age ranges of what could have happened. One was I want to say he was either 7 or 8 years old. Poor kid had his tonsils taken out. 2 days later or the day after, I forgot what it was. No complications. Sitting on the couch, mom's in the kitchen making him lunch, a bowl of ice cream, whatever it was. He starts coughing violently. She brings him to the urgent care walk-in clinic. Long story short, the poor guy ruptured the wound inside his neck and literally bled to death. Poor kid. So seeing this little guy on the table was terrible. The other one was an infant. This was in a dive motel here in town that the mom and the twin infants lived in this motel room. And the dad, who already had a outstanding warrant from the U.S. Marshals, showed up. Mom comes home. She was working in the motel. Mom comes home, sees the baby unresponsive. Dad bolts. Long story short, the baby who died was next to dad, who was smoking meth. The baby died of secondhand meth smoke, essentially.
Oh my.
The twin, there but for the grace of God, was unscathed. But then when I did the investigation in the motel room, I saw probably the most shocking thing I've ever seen before. Worse than jacuzzi guy. I open up the bathroom door, and from the toilet bowl from the front of the toilet bowl to the back of the toilet bowl, up the wall, easily a foot, was burnt foil from fentanyl. The whole bathroom. So whether it was mom or dad, but I looked at the cops and I said, there is no way this woman didn't know what was happening in here. So the hard part of a baby investigation, I'm sure you guys have had to deal with this too, is you have to do the reenactment. And that's a true torture test where you literally have to sit with the parent with a doll, and they have to go through the entire process of how they found their deceased baby, what they did, and whatnot. Now, mom's story didn't make sense. She was all over the place. So I had a female officer outside, and she said, this lady's getting arrested for contributing to child endangerment resulting in death. So I went inside with a partner. Mom ran through the whole thing, said, okay, ma'am, you can go outside now. And the female officer was out there and hooked her up right away and took her away. And then the husband, or whatever he was, the baby daddy, I think he was eventually found. It was a while later that the marshals found him, but I think he was eventually found too. But no, baby deaths suck.
Yeah, that's luckily when I was on patrol, I never had to deal with a child death. I mean, I had coworkers that, did CPR on babies and they didn't make it. I did have one that stayed with me for the longest time, and it was a wreck, which we didn't even work wrecks in the county, but there was a wreck on, this major highway on the 528 by the Florida Mall, and I happened to be working off duty, so I'm like, hey, county, everybody can stay, working, they can stay 10-8, and I'll go to the scene until FHP shows up at the Florida Highway Patrol, and when I get there, I remember seeing the driver, who was a female. She was deceased. On top of her was her passenger, who was one of her nieces, who was about 12 years old, and it just so happened that it was a family traveling in two different vehicles. So that 12-year-old's mom is standing next to me, asking me, is my baby okay? And and I, when the eyes are open, but they're dead. And mom is standing there asking me, is my baby okay? Is my baby okay? And, she wasn't. And I didn't know that underneath both of them, there's a 5-year-old pinned. And she was dead also. And that stayed with me for the longest time.
Yeah.
But I've been pretty fortunate. And other than that,
and these are things, though, that people who aren't in our field don't understand. They can criticize us, they can say this, they can say that, but, stand in my shoes or your shoes for a shift and tell me what if your attitude is going to change any. And if it doesn't, then there's something wrong with you.
Oh yeah. Joe, let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about the migrant recovery, the recovery migrant party.
So I retired, hit the golden age of 67, which I'm kind of enjoying a little bit, but you know me, I got to stay active. I'm not going to be that guy that's going to be fishing every day, because I'd probably jump in and you'd have to pull me out anyway. So what I did is I started this organization where, we concentrate on training, kind of like what you guys do. We don't do the podcast, but, training, I'm all about that. But then I was made aware, well, let me backtrack a step. So New Mexico, during the rush of migrants, experienced almost 200 migrant deaths over, I think it was a 3 or 4 year period, where 2022 or 23 was horrendous. There was almost 180. A lot of it has to do with the dynamic of the border, how Governor Greg Abbott shut down Texas, and how we're a sanctuary, come on in state, and problem is that people are coming in through extremely inhospitable areas. So when I was at OMI, I saw that there was some success in repatriating some people. I mean, we even got calls, believe it or not, from coyotes, or actually family members who got calls from coyotes that said, listen, your family member couldn't keep up with us. Check in this area, these coordinates, you may find them dead there. So that was kind of intriguing. But a lot of these people are never found. When we look at the border dynamic, they're not always crossing in waves. They're crossing surreptitiously through holes in the fence, trying to evade law enforcement. So the running number is estimate, I should say. You have those who are apprehended, but then you have the gotaways. You hear a lot about the gotaways. Gotaways account for every apprehension. I think on the low side, there's 3 gotaways. Okay. So my concern is the gotaways. And a lot of these people are dying in the desert. Now, I always qualify this fact. I am 100% unashamedly in favor of border security, the border strategies that we're employing, because they work. But we're dealing with extremely highly motivated people who want to come into the United States for whatever reason, whether it's for escape from the stuff that we saw in El Salvador, the stuff that we had seen in Mexico, and there's no stopping them. we do these campaigns half-heartedly where don't make the journey, okay? But you've been to the barrios in El Salvador. I've been to them there in Mexico. You live in those conditions. You don't care what anybody's saying. I'm going to take the chance and roll the dice. These people are taking a 50-50 chance of surviving crossing over, regardless of what you think. A lot of these people don't make it, and we don't know how many people don't make it. And my personal philosophy is that A, nobody deserves to die like that, and B, nobody deserves to die alone and be left out in the elements. So I spoke with this one organization who was doing migrant remain recovery, and there just was some things that weren't clicking with me. They had an antagonistic relationship with local law enforcement, which, is counterintuitive because you need law enforcement to respond to the scene. You're not going to bag the body up and take it home and decide, I'm going to bring it up to OMI now. So you need these relationships. So I contacted a search and rescue team down in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and said, listen, I have no doubt that there's migrant remains out there. There's bones, there's property, whatever. Because again, most of the bodies that are found on the border are found by accident. Either law enforcement is going to apprehend another group of individuals, or it's on a routine patrol. So obviously, we've dealt with elements that if they don't want to be found, they're not going to take the main paths. They're not going to take the main roads. So I'm talking with the search and rescue group, and we're looking to put together what we want to call a migrant remains search and recovery team. And they have drones. I have maps of where a lot of the border crosses had been found. So we're going to extrapolate this, make search grids, and use their drones, their cadaver dogs, and me, I'd be on the ground team, but giving them the intel, and essentially look for remains of migrants. Are they people who were legitimate migrants who made the crossing, or were they murdered in the desert? We don't know. We don't care. Okay. But people don't deserve to die and be left like that. So what we're going to do is that if we find remains, we're going to cordon off the area just like a law enforcement, crime scene, call law enforcement up, who will then call up the Office of the Medical Investigator. So there'll be continuity of chain of custody of the remains. And hopefully the anthropologist will be able to identify the bones, do DNA run. But I mean, that becomes a problem because a lot of the migrants, we don't have anything to compare their DNA to unless the families have ever put DNA in. We have had some, I personally had fingerprinted dozens of deceased migrants of different stages of death, we can call it. Some were not even dead a couple days to a couple that were really desiccated. And we were able to get prints on them, and sometimes we'd actually get a hit. We would typically go through the FBI to do identification, but again, my office wasn't really familiar as they should have been with the dynamic of the border, in that they weren't using HSI, because HSI is going to have the border encounters. So I opened up a relationship with HSI, and we were able to do some work in getting some people identified through them. I had one individual who was found deceased in an apartment with another woman. I think either they died naturally or it was an overdose, but he was in a significant state of decomposition. But we found his green card, and it had a picture on the back. And our office had him for a couple years until I asked, has anybody ever contacted HSI for this guy? And it was like, I just invented the light bulb. No, nobody ever did. Long story short, it wound up that it was his picture, it was his fingerprint on the back, but the name on the card belonged to a deceased kid in New York City. So it was a counterfeit card. So there's a lot to still be done. Even though migrant crossings are down significant, there's dozens, if not hundreds, of bodies still out there.
Joe, real quick on that one case, because you and I talked about this the other night. How long exactly was that body there
I
until
want
we
to
got
say
involved?
at least 2 years.
Okay, and just share with everybody else how you were able to identify him.
Oh, okay. So I think we're talking about the other case. So we have another case that was, we're assuming it was cartel related, of a former inmate in the New Mexico Department of Corrections that was found in an arroyo, which is like a drainage ditch out here. His hands had been cut off. His head has been cut off. His head was later found further downstream, but he did have a distinguishing tattoo, which I knew what it was, again, because of the gang tattoo background. Spoke with the investigator, and they said, yeah, we agree. There may be a possibility that this is who it may be, but we don't make a definitive identification of a body unless it's scientific. Obviously, we're not going to do it just on tattoos. So I spoke with the suspected brother, and he goes, listen, my brother struggled. He was in the prison system in New Mexico, prison system in Texas. Now, we've had this guy for at least 3 years, and nobody knew what to do with this guy. So I called up the New Mexico Department of Corrections, and I said, listen, I think we have this guy. Do you have his dental records? Because we found the head that the anthropologist in our office was able to connect and validate belonged to the rest of the body. So dental records usually is the big identifier. But New Mexico expunged this guy's medical records because he hadn't been in the system for 5 years. So that lead went down the toilet. So I asked the brother, where else was your brother incarcerated? Because the guy definitely had a challenged history. And he said he was in Huntsville prison. And anybody who knows Texas prison system, Huntsville prison is for hardcore criminals. So I called up Huntsville and I said, listen, I got this guy. Do you have his dental records? And I mean, Texas has its act together. He was in Texas prison system before he was in New Mexico. They said, yeah, we still have it, but you have to call this number in Austin. Long story short, I got the dental records from Texas, and we were able to identify the body in less than a week. In the meantime, he was in our office for almost 3 years.
Wow. And again, it's like you said. I mean, independent of the fact that they were crossing the border illegally, nobody deserves to die that way, or even more so, the family not even knowing, if their family member made it through the border, or are they somewhere in the United States working. It's.
And we would get those phone calls regularly. We would get phone calls from Mexico or a family member in the States saying, they admitted, hey, my cousin tried to cross the border. And that gets back to the beginning of our discussion on how naive officials are of the border dynamic. Rather than tell these people not to come, because if they're coming, or they're going to try to at least come, they have to make an effort on their side to leave some form of identification other than a photo ID. Because unfortunately, these people are found as skeletal remains.
Does HSI have a DNA database? I know they have fingerprints from encounter, but do they have a DNA database?
I don't know. I'm thinking that the only DNA database, and I could be wrong because I really truly don't know, could be a CODIS type system where if they were incarcerated for some reason or another. That's something that I do have to research more, but I am going to be bringing HSI into this project. They're probably not going to be able to do anything because it's kind of outside their purview. But, in terms of CODIS being a valuable source, I've had mixed results would be the polite way to put it with DNA testing with CODIS. Because if the person's never been put in the system, they're never going to be in CODIS. And a lot of our people aren't going to do it. And our office was not very enthusiastic at the time of using the genetic genealogy, which every large police department is getting into now.
It's being used more and more by multiple agencies. And Joe, we want to be respectful of your time. We don't want to take too much of your time. So tell us a little bit about the three books that you've written.
Sure. So the first one was Teen Violence in America, How Do We Save Our Children? I go over real life crime situations committed by teenagers, and I like to think I'm in that bridge generation where I graduated high school in 1976, where people were still accountable for their actions. Their parents still made sure their kids were accountable for their actions. If you got in trouble at school, if you were dumb enough to go home and tell your parents that you got in trouble at school, you got in trouble again. The parents weren't going up to the school threatening to sue or whatever. So a lot of it has to do with the erosion of our society, lack of accountability, but also by the same token, what could be done? It's not just doom and gloom without providing suggestions on, how we can fix problems. The other book, actually, I hold really close to my heart, is called Blood Ties, how a Texas prison gang became a Mexican cartel proxy. It's about the Barrio Azteca gang from El Paso and how they forged the cross-border marriage because of the organic nature of the border, where a lot of their members, once they served their prison time in the United States, were deported to Texas. Same as what happened with MS-13. We deported them back to El Salvador. And, to a certain extent, rather than eliminate a problem, we kind of created a monster. So they wound up being instrumental in the bloodbath in Juarez as the foot soldiers for the Juarez cartel. And then the last one is a practical guide to criminal law for police officers, where it's not a law book. It's just a type of book where this is what you need to know to uphold the Constitution in your policing and why you need to do it and how to do it and how not to get in trouble in the meantime.
And if anyone is interested in getting one of your books, where can they go to get it?
I mean, Amazon, thrift books. I mean, bookstores have them. So yeah.
But they can go on Amazon and get it.
Yeah.
Okay. And as far as this project that you have with the migrants, is how if anybody wants any information on it, or if anybody wants to get, maybe they're in New Mexico and they want to get involved somehow, how can they reach you?
You're free to share my email with them, and they can contact me by email.
Okay. You want to give out your email?
Yeah. It's director at S as in Sam, W, F as in Frank, IA.org. And I'll be more than happy to speak with people, what other options we have in identifying these poor people. It's something that needs to be done because there is definitely going to be a need. This is one of those tragedies that we're not going to know about until you look for it. And that's what we're going to do, is look for these poor people.
Okay. Well, excuse me, Joe, I want to thank you again for, accepting our invitation to sit down and talk to us for a little bit. Like I said, we want to be respectful of your time, but I think you've had a pretty interesting professional trajectory, if you will. you know, from the investigative journalism to working the jail to working with a medical examiner's office, and now, you know, getting involved with this project, you know, recovering migrant bodies. You know, I think that's all pretty interesting, and um, I see value in your project and what you're doing. And I want to personally thank you for, you know, the what 8-10 years of friendship that, you know,
Oh,
that we've had.
absolutely. Same here, bro.
So thank you again. You know, good luck to your entire family. God bless your family. I know you guys don't know, but one of Joe's kids is a pilot in the Army. So thanks to your son for his service.
Yeah.
So my son is up in the air. Your son is underwater.
Yeah, mine is underwater
In a boat.
floating bird.
You got to be careful. I'm a legal investigator. We got to make sure he's in a boat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Thank
kind of
you
funny
again,
though,
sir.
Rob. I didn't even think about that. My kid's flying Apache helicopters up in the air, and yours is in submarines under the water.
Under the water, yeah, yeah. He's actually out. He's in Virginia right now, going to a specialized school. So he's not
Very
on the
cool.
boat for at least 2 weeks. But
Yeah, my
again,
dad's
Joe,
in
thank you
Poland.
so much. Thank you so much. You know, if you know, we'll put out the information again, your email address, if anybody wants to contact you, or you know, we'll post the names of the books so that they can look for them also. But in the meantime, you know, if any, I don't know, this is our first venture in the English language uh, podcast history of our podcast.
And I guarantee you we made less grammatical mistakes in English than in Spanish.
It is so funny. Joe, we get hammered all the time, especially Jose's mom and my brother. We probably can't. They don't. We probably don't even finish an episode, and they already know that we screwed something up.
Yeah. Well, it's fun.
But
My wife teases me when I try to speak Spanish. But you know what's funny, and I'll let you guys go, is that, you know, talking about the different subclassifications of Hispanics. So like when I worked in Queens, I was dealing with the Puerto Rican population and the Dominican population. So there would be times where I wouldn't understand what they were saying. So I would get my wife on the phone and she would say, I have no idea what this guy's saying, you know, and there is a definite distinction, you know, with her Mexican Spanish between, and then Dominican and Puerto Rican. It's kind of fascinating, the differences. And then in El Salvador, they have their own dialect too.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, lucky for Jose and I, we speak Cuban, so we can communicate with Alex.
We speak Puerto Rican, we speak Dominican, we speak Cuban, Colombian.
Yeah.
Colombian, because Jose and I were both married, you know, with Colombians, and and Alex speaks Puerto Rican because he's married to a Puerto Rican.
That's right.
There you go. That's awesome. Colombia must have been awesome though.
Oh, it's I love going to go. We went for spring break, got back on a Saturday, Sunday night, wherever he bought tickets for Christmas.
No
So we're
kidding.
going back. Oh yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much, Joe.
All right,
And
boys.
again, just for everybody else, you know, if you want to watch this episode, you can go to YouTube, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@llamados a servir podcast. If you found the podcast, you can just type the name from the screen and find it, I guess. I did horribly trying to spell it during the last episode, so I'm not going to. But thank you guys. And Joe, thank you for being our first English-speaking guest on the podcast.
I'm honored. Thank you for asking me.
Good input.
All right, well,
Okay, guys.
Yeah. Oh, el próximo, Joe, el próximo es en español.
Un poquito.
Well, thank you
right,
so
boys.
much,
Take
guys.
care.
And for everybody else, thank you for listening, and God bless you all.
Same to you.